I'm just going to jump straight into it and we can talk about it afterwards or not. Like, whatever, I don't care. Okay. Introduction. After 3,000 years of explosion, by means of fragmentary and mechanical technologies, the Western world is imploding. During the mechanical ages, we had extended our bodies in space. Today, after more than a century of electric technology, we have extended our central nervous system itself in a global embrace, abolishing both space and time as far as our planet is concerned. Rapidly, we approach the final phase of the extensions of man, the technological simulation of consciousness, when the creative process of knowing will be collectively and corporately extended to the whole of human society, much as we have already extended our senses and our nerves by various media. Whether the extension of consciousness, so long sought up by advertisers for specific products, will be a good thing is a question that admits of a wide solution. There's little possibility of answering such questions about the extensions of man without considering all of them together. Any extension, whether of skin, hand, foot, affects the whole psychic and social complex. Some of the principal extensions, together with some of their psychic and social consequences, are studied in this book. Just how little consideration has been given to such matters in the past can be gathered from the consternation of one of the editors of this book. He noted in dismay that 75% of your material is new. A successful book cannot venture to be more than 10% new. Such a risk seems quite worth taking at the present time when the stakes are very high, and the need to understand the effects of the extensions of man becomes more urgent by the hour. In the mechanical age now receding, many actions could be taken without too much concern. Slow movement ensured that the reactions were delayed for considerable periods of time. Today, the action and the reaction occur almost at the same time. We actually live mythically and integrally, as it were, but we continue to think in the old fragmented space and time patterns of the pre-electric age. Western man acquired from technology of literacy the power to act without reacting. Introduces some of the themes that he will be exploring later, which has a lot to do with this metaphor of like the human as cyborg. So like every piece of technology that we make is basically an extension of ourselves. Like even though, you know, it's a tool that exists separate from me, it becomes a part of my body. And like, does that make other parts of my body less competent at what it can do without these technologies? Okay, this is that part of the text where he drops that famous line, "The medium is the message." Let's find out what that means. It's very buzzy, very oft repeated, but I actually don't know what it means. But we're going to find out right now. In a culture like ours, long accustomed to splitting and dividing all things as a means of control, it is sometimes a bit of a shock to be reminded that, in operational and practical fact, the medium is the message. This is merely to say that the personal and social consequences of any medium, that is, of any extension of ourselves, result from the new scale that is introduced into our affairs by each extension of ourselves or by any new technology. Thus, with automation, for example, the new patterns of human association tend to eliminate jobs. It is true. That is the negative result. Positively, automation creates roles for people, which is to say depth of involvement in their work and human association that our preceding mechanical technology had destroyed. Many people would be disposed to say that it was not the machine, but what one did with the machine that was its meaning or message. In terms of the ways in which the machine altered our relations to one another and to ourselves, it mattered not in the least whether it turned out cornflakes or Cadillacs. The restructuring of human work and association was shaped by the technique of fragmentation that is the essence of machine technology. The essence of automation technology is the opposite. It is integral and decentralist in depth, just as the machine was fragmentary, centralist, and superficial in its patterning of human relationships. The instance of the electric light may prove illuminating in this connection. The electric light was pure information. It is a medium without a message, as it were, unless it is used to spell out some verbal ad or name. This fact, characteristic of all media, means that the content of any medium is always another medium. The content of writing is speech, just as the written word is the content of print, and print is the content of the telegraph. So he's like thinking about form and content here, and can form become content? The content, blah blah blah. If it is asked, what is the content of speech? It is necessary to say, it is an actual process of thought, which is in itself non-verbal. An abstract painting represents direct manifestation of creative thought processes as they might appear in computer designs. What we are considering here, however, are the psychic and social consequences of the designs or patterns as they amplify or accelerate existing processes. For the message of any medium or technology is the change of scale or pace or pattern that it introduces into human affairs. The railway did not introduce movement or transportation or wheel or road into human society, but it accelerated and enlarged the scale of previous human functions, creating totally new kinds of cities and new kinds of work and leisure. This happened whether the railway functioned in a tropical or northern environment and is quite independent of the freight or content of the railway medium. The airplane, on the other hand, by accelerating the rate of transportation, tends to dissolve the railway form of city, politics, and association, quite independently of what the airplane is used for. Let us return to the electric light. When the light is being used for brain surgery or night baseball, that's a matter of indifference. It could be argued that these activities are in some way the content of the electric light, since they could not exist without the electric light. This fact merely underlines the point that the medium is the message because it is the medium that shapes and controls the scale and form of human association and action. When we're talking about the message, it's like, what is a message? So if you think about the form of the letter, like the epistolary, which is a fancy word for like the art of letter writing, the form of the letter, which comes with its own inventions, for example, like you always have to begin with like, how you're gonna like address the person, like dear madame or like dear sir or whatever, and you have to like conclude or sign off with, I don't know, like best regards. Anyway, that is like the form, and that comes with its own conventions, its own sort of like ways of containing and shaping the message, but the message itself, I guess like the content is the thing that's up for interpretation. And I guess like the thing that Marshall McLuhan is announcing that he's going to interpret here is the psychic and social consequences of like how these media forms have, he's like interested in transitions, like he's interested in change over time. He's kind of like doing this vast ranging anthropological study of how human communication technology has like changed over time, and what that means for us in terms of like our psychology, and what that means for us in terms of like its social and political consequences, like how we exist alongside other people. I think with the railway and like planes metaphor, he's kind of like talking about the fact that, or the like way that he's going to talk about media is that like new technologies do not in fact introduce anything new into human ways of being, or like anything sort of like totally revolutionary. All it does is change the scale or the pace or pattern of ways of relating that have always existed. It just like makes it faster or like bigger or like more or less efficient. Okay, now we are onto chapter 4, the gadget lover. I'm just going to move my sparkling drink so that the sparkles don't interfere with the sound. Chapter 4, the gadget lover. Narcissus as Narcosis. The Greek myth of Narcissus is directly concerned with the fact of human experience, as the word Narcissus indicates. It is from the Greek word narcosis, or numbness. The youth Narcissus mistook his own reflection in the water for another person. This extension of himself by mirror numbed his perceptions until he became the servo mechanism of his own extended or repeated image. The nymph Echo tried to win his love with fragments of his own speech, but in vain. He was numb. He had adapted to his extension of himself, and he had become a closed system. The myth of Narcissus and Echo, basically it's about this river nymph who really pisses off one of the gods, so she gets cursed with like not being able to say anything except the ends of other people's phrases or sentences, much like the way echo happens in real life. If you've ever like been in an echo cave or like had a karaoke microphone with reverb. Anyway, like Echo falls in love with this beautiful boy called Narcissus, and like she tries to call out to him, but she could only repeat the ends of his phrases, so he's just like WTF. Anyway, they finally meet, and she's like, you know, I love you, but she doesn't say that because she can't. And he's like, may I die before you touch me? And all she could say in reply was, touch me, touch me, touch me, which, it's so sad, guys. Anyway, her friends are like, this is so unfair, so they pray to Nemesis, the god of revenge, to like, punish Narcissus, and Nemesis is like, okay, bet, and makes him fall in love with his own image, that is like reflected in a pool of water. And it just makes me think about like how revolutionary it is that we now have like selfie cameras that gives us the option of like seeing ourselves at all times, whereas in the past like people would be like definitely more familiar with other people's faces than they are with their own, because there was no such thing as mirrors. Also, I looked up the word servo mechanism, and that basically is just like a like engineering term describing feedback loops. So yeah, I don't know, like the Greeks were kind of the first, like they were already thinking about like feedback loops and like cybernetics and like closed systems. Now, the point of this myth is the fact that men at once become fascinated by any extension of themselves in any material other than themselves. There have been cynics who insisted that men fall deepest in love with women who give them back their own image, which this is not about. Be that as it may, the wisdom of the Narcissus myth does not convey any idea that Narcissus fell in love with anything he regarded as himself. Like, he didn't actually see his mirror image as himself. He was like, oh, cool, there's just some dude in the water. Obviously, he would have had very different feelings about the image had he known it was an extension or repetition of himself. Is that the relationship that we have to technology? Like, maybe the problem is that Narcissus did not recognize the fact that that was his reflection. And maybe we're not recognizing that technology, like we see it as something outside of ourselves rather than not necessarily a reflection, but like an extension. It is perhaps indicative of the bias of our intensely technological and therefore narcotic culture that we have long interpreted the Narcissus story to mean that he fell in love with himself, that he imagined the reflection to be Narcissus. Physiologically, there are abundant reasons for an extension of ourselves involving us in a state of numbness. Medical researchers like Hans Selye and Adolf Jonas hold that all extensions of ourselves, in sickness or in health, are attempts to maintain equilibrium. Any extension of ourselves they regard as auto-amputation, very important term there, and they find that the auto-amputative power or strategy is resorted to by the body when the perceptual power cannot locate or avoid the cause of irritation. A language has many expressions that indicate the self-amputation that is imposed by various pressures. We speak of wanting to jump out of my own skin, or going out of my mind, or being driven batty, or flipping my lid. And we often create artificial situations that rival the irritations and stresses of real life under controlled conditions of sport and play. While it was no part of the intention of Jonas and Selye to provide an explanation of human invention and technology, they have given us a theory of disease, discomfort, that goes far to explain why man is impelled to extend various parts of his body by a kind of auto-amputation. In the physical stress of superstimulation of various kinds, the central nervous system acts to protect itself by a strategy of amputation or isolation of the offending organ or sense or function. Thus, the stimulus to new invention is the stress of acceleration, of pace, and increase of load. For example, in the case of the wheel as an extension of the toot, what is a toot? The pressure of new burdens resulting from the acceleration of exchange by written and monetary media was the immediate occasion of the extension or amputation of this function from our bodies. Like, he seems to be saying that an increase in like the pace of our lives, or like too much stimulation, like, you know, when things are too stimmy, like when things are overstimulating, like we invent extensions of ourselves in order to like basically like as a pressure valve for some of that stress, such as sport and play and the wheel. The wheel, as counter-irritant to increased burdens, in turn brings about a new intensity of action by its amplification of a separate or isolated function, the feet in rotation. Such amplification is bearable by the nervous system only through numbness or the blocking of perception. This is the sense of the Narcissus myth. The young man's image is a self-amputation or an extension induced by irritating pressures. As counter-irritant, the image produces a generalized numbness or shock that declines recognition. Self-amputation forbids self-recognition. The principle of self-amputation as an immediate relief of strain on the central nervous system applies very readily to the origin of the media of communication from speech to computer. Physiologically, the central nervous system, that electric network that coordinates the various media of our senses, plays the chief role. Whatever threatens its function must be contained, localized or cut off, even to the total removal of the offending organ. The function of the body as a group of sustaining and protective organs for the central nervous system is to act as buffers against sudden variations of stimulus in the physical and social environment. Sudden social failure or shame is a shock that some may take to heart, or that may cause muscular disturbance in general, signaling for the person to withdraw from the threatening situation. Therapy, whether physical or social, is a counter-irritant that aids in that equilibrium of the physical organs which protect the central nervous system. Whereas pleasure is a counter-irritant, for example, sports, entertainment, and alcohol, comfort is the removal of irritants. Both pleasure and comfort are strategies of equilibrium for the central nervous system.